Advaita Gadadhara Siva Sadi Sigaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I welcome all for reading Prabhupada Lilamrita. Today we'll be beginning new chapter, right? Chapter 17, am I right? No, 16 is done, yeah. Chapter 17. So yesterday chapter 16 is free to preach. That's really brought big change to the situation. Now he's free to do first time in all these years, including India and here this first time. Feels like things are moving a little better. And as yesterday we discussed that all the people are suggesting the paradox. And the paradox is better to move to downtown. From the lower side to downtown, that's more appropriate. More people will be coming, people will come and all these things. So today we will begin the chapter 17 on the Bowery. On the Bowery. This is nice. I could not understand the difference between friends and enemies. My friend was shocked to hear that I was moving to the Bowery. But although I passed through many dangers, I never thought that this is danger. Everywhere I thought this is my home. Srila Prabhupada in conversation. April 1969. April 1966. Someone broke into room 307 while Srila Prabhupada was out and stole his typewriter and tape recorder. When Prabhupada returned to the building, the janitor informed him of the theft. An unknown burglar had broken the transom glass, climbed through, taken the valuables, and escaped. As Prabhupada listened, he became convinced that the janitor himself was the culprit. Of course, he couldn't prove it, so he accepted the loss with disappointment. Some friends offered replacement for his old typewriter and tape recorder. In a letter to India, he described the theft as a loss of more than 1,000 rupees, which is $157. It is understood that such crime as has been committed in my room is very common in New York. This is the way of material nature. American people have everything in ample, and the workers get about ₹100 as daily wages, and still there are thieves for want of character. The social condition is not very good. I hope we don't have to prove this thing, right? Considering the situation is happening. Prabhupada had told Joseph Foster, the Scindia ticket agent, that he would be returning to India in a couple of months. That was 7 months ago. Now, for the first time since his arrival, Prabhupada returned to the Scindia ticket office in Brooklyn. He talked about the theft to Mr. Foster, who responded with "Welcome to the club," and told Prabhupada about the recent theft on his own automobile. Such things, he explained, were not unusual for New York City. He told Prabhupada of the dangers of the city and how to avoid thefts and muggings. Prabhupada listened, shaking his head, and he told Mr. Foster that American young people are misguided and confused. He discussed his plans for returning to India and showed Mr. Foster one of his Bhagavatams. Prabhupada had lost his spirit for living in room 307. What would prevent the janitor from stealing again? Harvey Cohen and Bill Epstein had advised him to relocate downtown and had assured him of a more interested following among the young people there. It had been an attractive proposal, and he began to reconsider it. Then Harvey offered Prabhupada his studio on the Bowery. Haribo. So this is what the whole magic is going to begin. The title begins with Bowery. He finds in the room 3-1 lost his typewriter and recorder. Typewriter and recorder. And he was shocked. He was thinking, what is scarcity here? Beginning itself, he said that America is a rich country by seeing the condition of the people. And he writes that, people have everything. Still, they want to steal. He understood that it's not the scarcity of money, it's the character. And he felt, the janitor itself has taken, but what to do? He has no choice. So now he shared his sorrow to Mr. Foster, who is the ticket agent. He said, welcome to the world, because this is what is normal in this place. This you will find this more often. So somehow the Mr. Harvey, I think Harvey is Hayagriva Prabhu, I think. Later he's going to be initiated. Mr. Harvey Point and Bill Epstein, they're helping to relocate to downtown, at the Bowery, where Mr. Harvey has a place. Offered Prabhupada his studio on the Bowery, actually. Gaurav?
Harvey had been working as a commercial artist for a Madison Avenue advertising firm when recently acquired inheritance had spurred him to move into a loft on the Bowery to pursue his own career as a painter. But he was becoming delusionized with New York. A group of acquaintances addicted to heroin had been coming around and taking advantage of his generosity, and his loft had recently been burglarized. He decided to leave the city and go to California. But before leaving, he offered his loft for Prabhupada to share with David Allen. David Allen had heard that Harvey Cohen was moving to San Francisco if he could sublet his air loft. Harvey hadn't known David very long, but on the night before Harvey was supposed to leave, he coincidentally met David 3 different times in 3 different places on the Lower East Side. Harvey took this as a sign that he should rent the loft to David, but he especially stipulated that the Swami should move in too. As Prabhupada was preparing to leave his 72nd Street address, an acquaintance, an electrician who worked in the building, came to warn him. The Bowery was no place for a gentleman. He protested. It was the most corrupt place in the world. Prabhupada's things had been stolen from room 307, but moving to the Bowery was not the answer. So Harvey his job was as an artist, and after he had earned a small inheritance, he moved to the Bowery, but there he was burglarized, so he decided to move to California. But before leaving, he offered his loft to Srila Prabhupada and to share with David Allen. And before Prabhupada prepared to leave his address, an electrician who worked in the building warned him, saying that the Bowery was no place for a gentleman, and that if his stuff had been stolen from room 37, the Bowery was definitely not the answer of him moving there.
AJ, what is the meaning of Bowery? Because it looks like in India we use this name, but not as far as I know, I realized it's the English word. What is the meaning of Bowery?
It's usually just kind of an area for like kind of like a cheap area, not quite a slum, but
Exactly.
and like an inexpensive kind of industrial area almost.
Yeah, in our place, anyone is familiar with this word? In our place, it's called Bowery. I don't know how they started. Maybe English people have given the name to them. Looks like we are also calling Bowery because they sometimes appear to not clean habits and all these things. So maybe British has given those names to people in India to that category, and people are still calling them as Bowery. Okay, read.
Srila Prabhupada's new home. The Bowery had a long history. In the early 1600s, when Manhattan was known as New Amsterdam and was controlled by the Dutch West India Company, Peter Minuit, the governor of New Netherlands, staked out a north-south road that was called the Bowery. Because a number of Boweries or farms lay on either side, it was a dusty country road lined with quaint Dutch cottages and bordered by the peach orchard growing in the estate of Peter Stuyvesant. It became part of the high road to Boston and was of strategic importance during the American Revolution as the only land entrance to New York City. In the early 1800s, the Bowery was predominated by German immigrants. Later in the century, it became predominantly Jewish, and gradually it became the city center of the theatrical life. However, as the history of Lower Manhattan describes, after 1870 came the period of the Bowery's celebrated degeneration. Fake auction rooms, saloons specializing in 5-cent whiskey and knockout drops, sensational dime museums, filthy and rat-ridden stale beer dives, together with Charles M. Hoyt's song, the Bowery, I will never go there anymore, fixed it forever in the nation's consciousness as a place of unspeakable corruption.
I think it's a great description. Huh? It's going also, Sasur Sai Maharaj writes about the Bowery place. I asked you now, here's the description. It's describes from 1600th century how it is evolutionized, how it was at the begin with Manhattan was known as Amsterdam. New Amsterdam was controlled by the Dutch West India Company. Then later by, later by what is it called? Who are they?
The Germans and then the Jewish.
German, yeah, German. Then British, right? Jewish, yeah, Jewish. Finally, British, right? British ruled, no country.
No, that would have been early on. That would have been in the 1700s.
Oh, 1700. Okay.
But so just real quick, if you ever seen the movie, there's a movie called Gangs of New York. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio.
James of the.
What's it?
What is the movie name?
Gangs of New York. But it's
Okay.
essentially it's about this area in the 1800s, and it's just debauchery and crime and just the worst of the worst. So it kind of has a history.
And it says that it's far over the nation's consciousness as a place of unspeakable corruption. So it's a worst place, looks like it was. Achha. You can read now, please.
The reaction of Prabhupada's electrician friend was not unusual. The Bowery is still known all over the world as Skid Row, a place of ruined and homeless alcoholics. Perhaps the uptown electrician had done business in the Bowery and had seen the derelicts sitting around, passing a bottle, or lying unconscious in the gutter, or staggering up to a passerby and drunkenly bumping into them to ask for money. Most of the Bowery's 7,000 or 8,000 homeless men slept in a lodging house that required them to vacate their rooms during the day. Having nowhere else to go and nothing else to do, they would loiter on the street, standing silently on the sidewalks, leaning against a wall, or shuffling slowly along alone or in groups. In cold weather, they would wear 2 coats and several suits of clothes at once and would sometimes warm themselves around a fire they would keep going in a city garbage can. At night, those without lodging slept on the sidewalks, doorsteps, and street corners, crawled into discarded boxes, or sprawled side by side next to the bars. Thefts were commonplace. A man's pockets might be searched 10 or 20 times while he slept. The rates of hospitalization and death in the Bowery were 5 times higher than the national average, and many of the homeless men bore marks of recent injuries or violence.
What a description. Wow.
Great place.
Oh my God. Many times I wonder, these cowboys movies, me and my wife used to watch cowboys movies, cowboys movie, right? They're wearing hat and everything. Always, their job is always shooting on each other. I don't know. I need to ask you, what is this, American history or something like that? Constantly, anytime they can shoot. That's the movies or serial on that. But you can explain on this.
Yeah, this was just a terrible area, right? And that's kind of just the summary there. cowboy movies, I guess loosely based in truth of the Wild West. But I mean, what's scary is this isn't in that same period, right? Those cowboy movies are usually 1800s. This is, we're talking in the 1970s, right? 1960s. This place was just completely derelict. It was.
Oh, this description is from 1960s.
Yeah. This is.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
I didn't realize. I thought he's still giving some description. He said, "Man slept in lodging houses." And another thing is, I read it here. If people are drunk and drunk and fall in the drain or something like that.
Yep, they're just so they get they would go to these shelters essentially, sleep there, but the rule was you can't stay there during the day, so they'd head out to the street, start drinking, and cause trouble out there, and then head back to the shelters at night or sleep on the sidewalks. And I mean, like it says, death and hospitalization rates were 5 times higher than anywhere else in America at the time. It was just a terrible place to be.
Well, I did hear, but never heard so details how it be. Wow, it's really horrible situation looks like. I'm glad you are here to explain all these things. Yeah. Cycle through, you can go ahead.
Prabhupada's loft, 94 Bowery, was 6 blocks south of Houston Street. At Houston and Bowery, derelicts converged in the heavy crosstown traffic. When cars stopped for the light, bums would come up and wash the windshields and ask for money. South of Houston, the first blocks held mostly restaurant supply stores, lamp stores, taverns, and luncheonettes. The buildings were of 3 and 4 stories, old, narrow, crowded tenements, their faces covered with heavy fire escapes. Traffic on the Bowery ran uptown and downtown. Cars parked on both sides of the street, and the constant traffic passed tightly. During the business day, working people passed briskly among the slow-moving derelicts. Many of the store windows were covered with protective iron gates, but behind the gates, the store owners lit their varieties of lamps to attract prospective wholesale and retail customers. 94 Bowery was just 2 doors north of Hester Street. The corner was occupied by the spacious Half Moon Tavern, which was frequented mostly by neighborhood alcoholics. Above the tavern sat a 4-story Bowery flop house marked by a neon sign, Palma House, which was covered by a protective metal cage and hung from the second floor on large chains. The hotel's entrance at 92 Bowery, which had no lobby but only a desolate hallway covered with dirty white tiles, was no more than 6 feet from the entrance to 94. 94 Bowery was a narrow 4-story building. It had long ago been painted gray and bore the usual facing of a massive black fire escape. A well-worn black double door, its glass panels reinforced with chicken wire, opened onto the street. The sign above the door read, AIR 3rd and 4th, indicating the artist in residence occupied those floors.
I think you can explain very nicely here. Yeah. Go ahead.
It is talking about the surroundings of Prabhupada's loft, 94 Bowery, where there were a lot of there were some restaurants, there were some lamp stores, and people were busy walking by. Cars were going downtown and uptown, and people who were drunk, they used to walk slowly, and most of these stores had protective metal cages, so that way only the serious people would go in and shop. And there were bars which was visited by the neighborhood alcoholics, and it is basically not a very good picture of Bowery, and Prabhupada was staying in this place.
The first floor of the next building north 96 Bowery was used for storage, and its front entrance was covered with a rusty iron gate. At 98 Bowery was another tavern, Harold's, smaller and dingier than the Half Moon. Thus, the block consisted of two saloons, a flop house, and two buildings with lofts. In the 1960s, loft living was just beginning in that area of New York City. The city had given permission for painters, musicians, sculptors, and other artists who required more space than available in most apartments to live in buildings that had been constructed as factories in the 19th century. After these abandoned factories had been fitted with fireproof doors, bathtubs, shower stalls, and heating, an artist could inexpensively use a large space. These were the AIR lofts. Har- Harvey Cohen's loft on the top floor of 94 Bowery was an open space almost 100 feet long from east to west and 25 feet wide. It received a good amount of sunlight on the east, the Bowery side, and it also had windows at the west end as well as a skylight. The exposed rafters of the ceiling were 12 feet above the floor. Prabhu, you only.
Me, huh? Okay, I'm born and brought up in New York. Second to born brought up in Bombay, he can explain. Anyway, AJ did Google, he said AIR means artist in residence. As artist in residence, right? Residence? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it looked like there was some law passed that for them to build these lofts in that area, each one had to have an artist living in the building. So that was the AIR. So an artist in residence loft was in every building.
Yeah. Next life we will take birth in here, so we'll understand more. So that's interesting, how the culture was, how it is coming up, because it is not we have to understand it was not a civilized society. It was not founded by the God conscious society. If you all know, until now, and I just want a contradiction, I will say, any place throughout in India, any place it is evolved, okay, is based always the centered a deity, around a deity. So it is called the deity of the village. So it's called Gram Devi or Gram Devta. I'm sure many of you understand this. So all these places, it means that India is, view in that consciousness, that Lord is the proprietor, always. So every place and always has a center, which is the deity. But not Western countries did not grow up like that. That's why the evolution we see, as Prabhupada immediately recognized, this place is full of passion. And I can't believe till now how planning they had made to the cities. It's impossible to make such plans, just like in America, everywhere same standards. I don't know, they had these plans from beginning itself, wide roads in line and everything. Where this came, I have no idea. But their mission and everything is totally different. And Indian continents, they grew as a spiritually centered. Now it's kind of mixed, neither this side nor that side. India is also suffering. Just wanted to share that how wide the description of these buildings are given is very, very weird. Coming a man from Vrindavan, at the most wonderful place in this universe, now he's stuck in this Bowery, unbelievable. Krishna brought him there. Okay, who else is going to read? Prasanthi, you can read.
Harvey Cohen had used the loft as an art studio, and racks for painting still lined the walls. A kitchen and shower were partitioned off in the northwest corner, and a room divider stood about 15 feet from the Bowery side windows. This divider did not run from wall to wall, but was open at both ends, and it was several feet short of the ceiling. It was behind this partition that Prabhupada had his personal living area. A bed and a few chairs stood near the window, and Prabhupada's typewriter sat on his metal trunk next to the small table that held his stacks of Bhagavatam manuscripts. His dhotis hung drying on a clothesline. On the other side of the partition was a dais about 10 feet wide and 5 feet deep, on which Prabhupada sat during his kirtans and lectures. The dais faced west toward the loft's large open space, open that is, except for the couple of rugs and an old-fashioned solid wood table and an easel. Harvey's painting of Lord Chaitanya dancing with his associates. The loft was a four-flight walk-up and the only entrance, and usually heavily bolted, was the door in the rear at the west end. From the outside, this door opened into a hallway lit only by a red exit light over the door. The hallway led to the right a few steps and into an open area. If the guest entered through a kirtana or a lecture, he would see the Swami about 30 feet from the entrance, seated on his dais. On other evenings, the whole loft would be dark, but for the glow of the red exit light in the little hallway and a soft illumination radiating from the other side of the partition where Prabhupada was working. So this describes about the loft. It was previously the factory which has been fitted for the loft for the artists. So it has a room divider which did not touch the ceiling. It is several feet low, and it is both open-ended, so it doesn't touch the walls either. So on one side, Prabhupada used to stay with his bed and few chairs and typewriter, and his Bhagavatam manuscripts are stacked. And he also had a clothesline to hang his dhotis. And there is a dais. On the other side was of the partition was the dais, and it was high. It is an elevated 5 feet. It was 5 feet deep. So Prabhupada sat during his kirtans, and it also describes that there was Lord Chaitanya's painting that Harvey did, and it also explains about the exit light and how the guests can enter. As soon as they enter, they can see Prabhupada on the dais. He is so many feet away, but they can see him as they enter. And that's all, Prabhu.
Okay, first time I'm hearing this harvest painting of Lord Chaitanya dancing with his associates. I didn't hear before he made it. Looks like he prepared, yeah, he painted that. I think we have seen that first time painting somewhere in some book. Okay, did you read this one? The loft was four flight walk up. Yeah,
Yes.
you already read it. Yes. See, in the Bauri now, Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya, Bhagavatam, everything is there. Now, very soon it's going to light up. Okay, Pranath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada lived on the Bowery, sitting under a small light, while hundreds of derelicts also sat under hundreds of naked lights on the same city block. He had no more fixed income than the derelicts, nor any greater security of a fixed residence. Yet his consciousness was different. He was translating Srimad Bhagavatam into English, speaking to the world through his Bhakti Vedanta purports. His duty, whether on the 14th floor of a Riverside Drive apartment building or in a corner of a Bowery loft, was to establish Krishna consciousness as the prime necessity for all humanity. He went on with his translating and with his constant vision of a Krishna temple in New York City. Because his consciousness was absorbed in Krishna's universal mission, he did not depend on his surroundings for shelter. Home for him was not a matter of bricks and wood, but of taking shelter of Krishna in every circumstance. As Prabhupada had said to his friends uptown, everywhere is my home, whereas without Krishna's shelter, the whole world would be a desolate place. Often he would refer to a scriptural statement that people live in three different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Life in the forest is in the mode of goodness, life in the city is in passion, and life in a degraded place like a liquor shop, a brothel, or the Bowery is in the mode of ignorance. But to live in a temple of Vishnu is to live in the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, which is transcendental to all three material modes. And this Bowery loft where Prabhupada was holding his meetings and performing kirtan was also transcendental. When he was behind the partition, working in his corner before the open pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, that room was as good as his room back at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan. Continue, Prabhu.
You can continue.
News of the Swamis move to the Bowery loft spread mostly by word of mouth at the Paradox restaurant, and people began to come by in the evening to chant with him. The musical kirtanas were especially popular on the Bowery, since the Swami's new congregation consisted mostly of local musicians and artists who responded more to the transcendental music than to the philosophy. Every morning he would hold a class on Srimad Bhagavatam attended by David Allen, Robert Nelson, and another boy, and occasionally he would teach cooking to whoever was interested. He was usually available for personal talks with any inquiring visitors or with his new roommate. So this whole thing talks about Srila Prabhupada's, where his heart and where his consciousness was amidst all the external um, unfavorable conditions, and wherever he was, his mission was one, to establish Krishna consciousness, uh, and he was translating Srimad Bhagavatam, and he had a vision of a Krishna temple in New York City, and so and says home for him was not a matter of bricks and wood, but of taking shelter of Krishna in every circumstance, and which was what his consciousness was fully absorbed in Krishna's mission. And and Prabhupada said to his friends, everywhere is my home, whereas without Krishna's shelter, the whole world would be a desolate place. So, and the place where he was, the three modes of material nature and are described here, and this Bovary was in the mode of ignorance. It's more, just because of the kind of people that they were living in the environment, and and Prabhupada was holding meetings and performing kirtan, and was constantly, uh, translating Srimad Bhagavatam behind the screens. And that room in which he was translating the Srimad Bhagavatam was as good as his room back at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan. And and people started getting attracted to the chanting. They came to the Bowery loft, and started chanting with him, and people started liking the kirtans, and mostly were local musicians and artists, more interested in the chanting, in the music than in the philosophy. We would hold Bhagavatam classes in the morning and also teach cooking to whoever was interested. Uh, Also available to have personal talks with any visitors were interested.
It's all spark of Krishna consciousness. Everything is sweet. From here we can see that
Mm.
everything is sweet. Otherwise, this thing, cooking or kirtan, or talk, and the devotee, Prabhupada himself is place of Vrindavan because he carried Vrindavan. So nothing can beat. Such a worst place also can be transformed into spiritual world. This unbelievable. Robert Nelson also, used to come in. So only 3 people in the morning Bhagavatam class. Huh? That's good. Mataji is there to read or no?
Yes, Prabhu.
Although Prabhupada and David each had a designated living area in the large loft, the entire place soon became dominated by Prabhupada's preaching activities. Prabhupada and David got on well together, and at first, Prabhupada considered David as an aspiring disciple. April 27. He wrote to his friends in India describing his relationship with David Allen. He was attending my class at 72nd Street along with others when I experienced this theft case in my room. He invited me to his residence, so I am with him and training him. He has good prospect because already he has given up all bad habits. In this country, illicit connection with women, smoking, drinking, and eating of meat are common affairs. Besides that, there are other bad habits like using only toilet paper and not bathing after evacuating, etc. But by my request, he has given up 90% of his old habits and he is chanting Mahamantra regularly. As I am giving him the chance, and I think he is improving. Tomorrow, I have arranged for some prasadam distribution, and he has gone up to purchase some things from the market. When David first came to the brewery, he appeared like a clean cut college student. He was 21, 6 feet tall, blue eyed, handsome, and intelligent looking. Most of his new friends in New York were older and considered him a kid. David's family lived in East Lansing, Michigan, and his mother was paying $100 monthly to sublease the loft. Although he did not have much experience, he had read that a new realm of mind expansion was available through psychedelic drugs, and he was heading fast into the hazardous world of LSD. His meeting with the Swami came at a time of radical change and profoundly affected his life. David. It was a really good relationship I had with the Swami, but I was overwhelmed by the tremendous energy of being that close to him. It spurred my consciousness very fast. Even my dreams at night would be so vivid of Krishna consciousness. I was often sleeping when the Swami was up because he was up late in the night working on his translations. That's possibly where a lot of consciousness and dreams just flowed in because of that deep relationship. It also had to do with studying Sanskrit. There was a lot of immediate impact with the language. The language seemed to have such a strong mystical quality the way he translated it word for word. So this is all Prabhupada's interaction with David. It explains how his relationship evolved over the time with David and how Prabhupada's influence has been helping David to change his lifestyle and his habits and things. Um, Prabhupada was explaining in his letter, I believe, to India. Um, how he's having influence on David. Um, and also, it's interesting to see what David is feeling about it. Like, in the paragraph above that, Prabhupada described that he had all these habits, but he's changing slowly and he's giving up his bad habits and all that. That was Prabhupada's impression on David. But when we look at here, what is David's feeling? It says he was overwhelmed by the tremendous energy of being that close to him. It's like all that what he was experiencing, what David was feeling about being. Even though he was doing a lot, he felt like it was too much for him to take, that even his dreams would be Krishna consciousness. But that is such a good thing that he had so much of close association. That's such a blessing for him. I think that, he had so much time to spend that close with Prabhupada, and being engaged by Prabhupada himself with those services, and Prabhupada working with him to, on his habits and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see both the perspectives of both Prabhupada and David.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Sure.
Still, America had a lot of prospectors because, because even though there's so many illicit stuff is there, regulatory principles they are following, but they're prospectors. They are cured and they didn't have a proper connection, family attachment, everything. So it is very profound success. India is so attached, even though they're following for regulatory principles. But no one, because they're already following for regulatory, for them is nothing. So anyway, so Srikar, please read.
Prabhupada's old friend from uptown, Robert Nelson, continued to visit him on the Bowery. He was impressed by Prabhupada's friendly relationship with David, who he saw was learning many things from Swami. Mr. Robert bought a small American-made hand organ, similar to an Indian harmonium, and donated it to David for chanting with Prabhupada. At 7 in the morning, Mr. Robert would come by, and after Bhagavatam class, he would talk informally with Prabhupada, telling his ideas for making recordings and selling books. He wanted to continue helping the Swami. They would sit in chairs near the front door, and Mr. Robert would listen while Prabhupada talked for hours about Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. New people began coming to see Prabhupada on the Bowery. Carl Yinge, a 30-year-old black man from the Bronx, had attended Cornell University and was now independently studying Indian religion and Zen Buddhism. He had experimented with drugs as psychedelic tool, and he had an interest in the music and poetry of India. He was influential among his friends and tried to interest them in meditation. He had even been dabbling in Sanskrit. Carl. I had just finished reading a book called The Wonder That Was India. I had gotten the definition of a sannyasi and a brahmachari and so forth. There was a vivid description in that particular book of how you could see a sannyasi coming down the road with his saffron robe. It must have made more than just a superficial impression on me, because it came to me this one chilly evening. I was going to visit Michael Grant, probably going to smoke some marijuana and sit around, maybe play some music, and I was coming down Hester Street. If you make a left on Bowery, you can go up to the Mike's place on Grand Street. But it's funny that I chose to go that way, because the shortest way would have been to go down Grand Street. But if I had gone that way, I would probably have missed Swami. So here it is mentioned like Prabhupada's old friend, like Robert Nelson. He was in Uptown, but still he continued to visit Prabhupada in Bowery, and then he was like very much impressed by Prabhupada's friendly relationship with David. He would come every day in the morning, attend the Bhagavatam class, and then after the Bhagavatam class, he would sit and chat with Prabhupada about he would convey his ideas about making records and selling books. And also he brought a small handheld organ, and then he gave it to David, and then for chanting with Prabhupada. And then also Robert also wanted to continue helping Swami in some way or other. And then they would, after the class and during their informal talks, they would sit together for hours, and Prabhupada would talk about Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, and Robert would listen. And slowly, many new people also they came to see Srila Prabhupada, and one of them was Carl. He was a 30-year-old black man from Bronx. So he attended Cornell University and studied, and was now like independently he was studying at that moment Indian religion and Zen Buddhism. So he experimented with drugs, and then also he had some interest in music and poetry of India. So he was kind of little influential among his group, and he was also learning a little bit of Sanskrit, and then he wanted to encourage his friends into meditation as well. So here, so Carl, he says about his experience with Prabhupada. So just then I think he finished reading some book, The Wonder That Was India, and then from that book he understood what a sannyasi and a brahmachari means. So so he mentioned his first meeting with Prabhupada here, how he came in touch with Srila Prabhupada. So one evening, one chilly evening, he was going to visit some Michael Grant, maybe his friend, and then he just wanted to go there to smoke some marijuana, sit around, play some music, and do some time pass. But then, but to go to his place, there are two ways supposedly, but the shorter way and the longer way. But the way he took, for some reason, he took the longer route, and then because of that, he saw Srila Prabhupada. Had he taken the other way, the shortest route, then he would have missed meeting Prabhupada.
Wonderful. So now the entry of Mr. Michael Grant is happening, right? The Michael Grant, Mukunda Goswami, at least. Now, Mukunda Maharaj is in Australia now. Right, Miracles of 22nd Avenue. There's you all remember the Robert, right? He was helping Prabhupada, taking him different places, finding a place for him, and asking him to go and sell the record. Prabhupada's kirtans, he wanted to make a record and sell. That's the one. He still is with Prabhupada. That's wonderful to know. Sridhari?
So I decided to go down Hester and then make a left. All of a sudden, I saw in this dingy alcove a brilliant saffron robe. As I passed, I saw it was Swamiji knocking on the door, trying to gain entrance. There were two bumps hunched up against the door. It was like a two-part door. One of them was sealed and the other was locked. The two bumps were lying on either side of Swamiji. One of these men had actually expired, which often happened, and you had to call the police or health department to get them. I don't think I saw the men lying in the doorway until I walked up to Swamiji and asked him, "Are you a sannyasi?" And he answered yes. We started this conversation about how he was starting a temple, and he mentioned Lord Chaitanya and the whole thing. He just came out with this flow of strange things to me right there in the street. But I knew what he was talking about somehow. I had the familiarity of having just read this book and delved into Indian religion. So I knew that this was a momentous occasion for me, and I wanted to help him. We banged on the door, and eventually we got into the loft. He invited me to come to a kirtana, and I came back later that night for my first kirtana. From that point on, it was a fairly regular thing, 3 times a week. At one point, Swamiji asked me to stay with him, and I stayed for about 2 weeks. Should I read another paragraph, Prabhu?
Yeah.
It was perhaps because of Karl's interest in Sanskrit that Prabhupada began holding Sanskrit classes. Karl and David and a few others would spend hours learning Sanskrit under Prabhupada's guidance. Using a chalkboard he found in the loft, Prabhupada taught the alphabet, and his students wrote their exercises in notebooks. Prabhupada would look over their shoulders to see if they were writing correctly and would review their pronunciation. His students were learning not simply Sanskrit, but the instructions of Bhagavad Gita. Each day he would give them a verse to copy in the Sanskrit alphabet, Devanagari, transliterate into the Roman alphabet, and then translate word for word into English. But their interest in Sanskrit waned, and Prabhupada gradually gave up the daily classes to spend time working on his own translations of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Karl decided to go down the Hester and he saw Prabhupada there knocking the door, uh, trying to gain an entrance, and there he saw uh, two people lying on either side of the Swamiji, and one of them had actually expired. So, they had to call police or health department to get them. And until he met sannyasi, Prabhupada, he didn't realize that those men were lying there. And Carl asked Prabhupada whether he was a sannyasi. And then Prabhupada answered yes, and they started the conversation. And Prabhupada started telling about the temple he was going to build. I mean, he wanted to build, and about Lord Chaitanya and whole Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada invited him to come for a kirtan, and later at that night he attended his first kirtan, and from that point every week he used to come 3 times, which became a regular thing from him. And at one point Prabhupada asked him to stay, and he stayed for about 2 weeks. That was because uh, might be it was because he had interest in Sanskrit, and Prabhupada used to teach Sanskrit to Carl, David, and even few others. And using a chalkboard, he used to teach Sanskrit, and he used to even check whether they are writing correctly and even pronouncing correctly. And it is not just simply Sanskrit, but actually he was teaching the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, and daily he would give them a verse to copy in Sanskrit alphabet, and again to transliterate into Roman, and again translate word to word into English language.
Oh,
But
nice.
sorry, Prabhu.
No, it is nice.
Yeah.
They were engaged in the service.
Yes, but as eventually Prabhupada gave up the daily classes and spent more time on translating the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Nice.
That's it.
Thank you. Vijayanand Prabhu, you're there? Okay, Swati Mataji, you're it.
His new friend may have regarded these lessons as Sanskrit classes, but actually they were Bhakti classes. He had not come to America as an ambassador of Sanskrit. His Guru Maharaj had ordered him to teach Krishna consciousness. But since he had found in Charles and some of his friends a desire to investigate the Sanskrit, he encouraged it. As a youth, Lord Chaitanya had also started a Sanskrit school with the real purpose of teaching love of Krishna. He would teach in such a way that every word meant Krishna, and when his student objected, he closed the school. Similarly, when Prabhupada found that his student interested in Sanskrit was a transitory, and since he himself had no mission on behalf of Sanskrit mm, linguistics, he gave it to up. He gave it up. By the standards of classical Vedic scholars, it takes 10 years for a boy to master the Sanskrit grammar. And if one does not start until his late 20s or 30s, it is usually too late. Certainly, none of the Swamiji's studies were thinking of entering a 10-year concentration in Sanskrit grammar. And even if they were, they would not realize spiritual truth simply by becoming the grammarians. Prabhupada thought it is better to utilize his own Sanskrit scholarship in translating the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam into English. Following the Sanskrit commentaries of the previous authorities, otherwise, the secret of Krishna consciousness would remain looked away in the Sanskrit. Teaching Charles Arrogance Devagiri Sandhi, verbs, conjugations, and nouns, declaration, dissonance,
Declension.
Declensions was not going to give the people of America transcendental Vedic knowledge. Better that he utilize his proficiency in Sanskrit for translating many volumes of Bhagavatam into English for millions of potential readers.
Okay, so now it's interesting. At least there's some interest, but it's a lot of patience to teach. You cannot read the Sanskrit. So they realize that it's not Sanskrit class, it's actually a bhakti classes. But in here it says Prabhupada also did not come for that, but now at least he taught. And here example is given. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching grammar, he had the students. But later, once he became devotee, once he took initiation, he taught his students only about Krishna in his grammar. Then students says, "What is this?" In his changing, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stopped. Okay, if you don't want to listen, then stop it. That's the incident is being narrated here. So anyway, eventually, the students gave up the Sanskrit study. But Prabhupada thought it's better to utilize his own Sanskrit scholarship in translating the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam into English, following the Sanskrit commentaries from the previous authorities. Otherwise, the secrets of Krishna consciousness would remain locked away in the Sanskrit. So, teaching Kal against Devanagari and Sandhi verb conjunction and noun declaration was not going to give the people of America transcendental Vedic literature. So basically, he said that better that he utilized his proficiency in Sanskrit for translating many volumes of the Bhagavatam into English for millions of people. So basically, he wanted to utilize his time best by translating himself. Then other people will help later. Okay, Asia, you please state.
Carol Becker came from an immigrant Catholic background, and she immediately associated with Catholicism. She immediately associated with Catholicism the Swami's presence as a spiritual authority and his devotional practice of chanting on beads and reciting from Sanskrit scriptures. Sometimes she would accompany Prabhupada to nearby Chinatown, where he would purchase ingredients for his cooking. He would cook daily, and sometimes Carol and others would come by to learn the secrets of cooking for Lord Krishna. Carol, he used to cook with us in the kitchen, and he was always aware of everyone else's activities in addition to his own cooking. He knew exactly how things should be. He watched everything and made sure everyone did everything correctly. He was a teacher. We used to make chapatis by hand, but then one day he asked me to get him a rolling pin. I brought my rolling pin, and he appropriated it. He put some men on rolling chapatis and supervising them very carefully. I made a chutney for him at home. He always accepted our gifts graciously, although I don't think he ever ate them. Perhaps he was worried we might put in something that wasn't allowed in his diet. He used to take things from me and put them in the cupboard. I don't know what he finally did with them, but I'm sure he didn't throw them away. I never saw him eat anything that I had prepared, although he accepted everything. I got a kick out of this one. I like the line. He asked me for his rolling pin, or he asked to see my rolling pin, and then he appropriated it.
Yeah.
So this is mine now. Thank you. So
what do you meaning he appropriated it means?
He stole it.
Oh, he stole it. Okay.
he decided he needed it, so he kept it for himself.
Okay.
It's a nice way to say he made what was mine his, but again, just talks about how he was teaching everybody the proper way to prepare food for Krishna, and how, again, attention to detail was important to him, and cleanliness, and how he, was making sure that everything was done correctly.
Yes. What else I was thinking here? It's interesting. I made chutney for him at home. He always accepted our gifts graciously, but although I don't think he ever ate them. No, it's not very easy, but we don't know. Prabhupada can eat, but generally they don't eat. But at least he accepted without making them. And it's a service. It's in love. So Prabhupada must accept it. That's the culture.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
does that go back to the idea that, right? Like it's again, I don't know if I understand fully, but it's like you don't want to eat other people's bad karma, right, or something to that
Yeah,
extent.
you're right. Yeah, because as a devotee, when you okay, uncooked food you can take, uncooked food, like, and you can give fruits, milk. Those are the considered pure. You can accept it, but generally devotees don't eat a cooked food from a non-devotee's hand,
Yeah.
and especially his sannyas ashram. His sannyas ashram is that. So it is same law for all the devotees, because your consciousness spoils. The food you eat from a person who is non-devotee, your consciousness also spoil you. It is there in that food. That's the science. So that's why it is. Yeah, in our devotees follow the same thing. We generally don't eat outside. No one, rarely. Sometimes we'll be eating, but everyone is eating. Whatever they cook, they offer to Krishna, they take. And we can see that is this whole vibration happening, right? All vibration happening is kitchen is then the center. Food plays a very, very important role. Now, because everybody is cooking, it builds a relationship, it brings the consciousness, purifies the consciousness. We will see lot. I think Prasadam acted like a miracle here. It attracts until now. There are a lot of guidelines, actually, unlimited guide. We compromise a lot based on the time, place, circumstances, but there's so much of guidelines. Even offering to the Lord also is not given much. But we, based on the time, place, circumstances, we accept so that the other person grows. But if somebody comes, he doesn't know, he is not a follower of Krishna, he doesn't have a faith, he's not a devotee, he cooks from his home, we don't accept it. Now also, even for us as well. Now, once at least somebody's taken the devotional service, understands, then we start taking. It's not a problem here. We still follow the similar protocol. Is it okay? Should we move? Should we move? Cycling Prabhu, you can read.
Prabhupada held his evening meetings on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays just he had uptown. The loft was out of the way for most of his acquaintances, and it was on the Bowery. A cluster of sleeping derelicts regularly blocked the street level entrance, and visitors would find as many as half a dozen bumps to step over before climbing the 4 flights of stairs. But it was something new. You could go and sit with a group of hip people and watch the Swami lead kirtan. The room was dimly lit, and Prabhupada would burn incense. Many casual visitors came and went. One of them, Gunter, had vivid impressions. Gunter, you walked right off the Bowery into a room filled with incense. It was quiet. Everyone was talking in a hushed tones, not really talking at all. Swamiji was sitting in front of the room and in meditation. There was a tremendous feeling of peace which I have never had before. I had happened to have studied for 2 years to become a minister and was into meditation, study, and prayer. But this was my first time to do anything Eastern or Hindu. There were lots of pillows, surrounds, and mats on the floor for people to sit on. I don't think there were any pictures or statues. It was just Swamiji, incense and mats, and obviously the respect of the people in the room for him. Before we went up, Carl was laughing and saying how Swami wanted everyone to use the hand symbols just correctly. I had never played the symbols before, but when it began, I just tried to follow Swamiji, who was doing it in a certain way. Things were building up, the sound was building up, when then someone was doing it wrong. And Swamiji just very, very calmly shook a finger at someone and they looked, and then everything stopped. He instructed this person from a distance, and this fellow got the right idea and they started up again. After a few minutes, the sound of the cymbals and the incense, we weren't in the Bowery any longer. We started chanting Hare Krishna. That was my first experience in chanting. I had never chanted before. There is nothing in Protestant religion that comes even close to that. Maybe Catholics with their Hail Marys, but it is not quite the same thing. It was relaxing and very interesting to be able to chant, and I found Swamiji very fascinating. So here it talks about Prabhupada has his kirtans 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And many people would have to cross over many addicts and everyone to come to his place on the Bowery, and they have to go over the steps. And one person was Gunter. So when he attended a kirtan, it describes the atmosphere in the room. It was very quiet. It was filled with incense, and Prabhupada was sitting in the front of the room and in meditation. And there were pillows and mats for the people to sit on. And Carl, before everything started, Carl would tell the people gathered how to use the symbols correctly. And Prabhupada would stop and correct if anyone was not playing the symbols correctly. They chanted Hare Krishna, and this person, he liked the Hare Krishna chanting. It is nothing close to what he was from the Protestant religion, and it was not close to that. Even Catholics who may chant Hail Mary, it was not comparable. So he found it very interesting and nice.
The loft was more open than Prabhupada's previous place uptown, so there was less privacy. And here some of the visitors were skeptical and even challenging. But everyone found him confident and joyful. He seemed to have far reaching plans, and he had dedication. He knew what he wanted to do and was single handedly carrying it out. It is not one man's job, he had said, but he went on doing all he could, depending on Krishna for the results. David was beginning to help, and more people were coming by to visit him. Almost all Prabhupada's Bauri friends were musicians or friends of musicians. They were into music, drugs, women, and spiritual meditation. Because Prabhupada's presentation of the Hare Krishna mantra was both musical and meditative, they were automatically interested. Prabhupada stressed that all the Vedic mantras or hymns were sung. In fact, the words Bhagavad Gita meant the song of God, but the words of the Vedic hymns were incarnations of God in the form of transcendental sound. The musical accompaniment of hand cymbals, drum, and harmonium was just that, an accompaniment, and had no spiritual purpose independent of the chanting of the name of God. Prabhupada allowed any instrument to be used as long as it did not detract from the chanting.
I thought you were summarizing.
Yeah, okay, Prabhu, I'll try. Now, the Prabhupada's place is even with more less privacy, and but everybody who saw him found that they found him very confident and joyful. Prabhupada has very long run plans, and he has dedication. He always says it can be done by a single person. It's not one man's job. Um, he did all what he could do, depending on Krishna for the results. And now David started helping him, and more people are coming by to visit him. And um, in the almost all of Prabhupada's Bhavari's friend, yeah, in Bhavari, the friends of Prabhupada were all musicians or friends of musicians. So and they are into music, drugs, women, and spiritual meditation. Hare Krishna Mahamantra chanting was both musical and meditative. They all got interest into it. Prabhupada stressed that all Vedic mantras are sung They are all Vedic hymns or incarnations of God. And he allowed any musical instrument in chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, which did not detract from the chanting. He says it is just an accompaniment, it is not necessary.
Thank you. Such a wonderful. People are now, first time people start experiencing the real Kirtan looks like. So everybody, we still have videos, old videos. I want to thank you. I want to have say that Friday is very special evening. We will have one of Prabhupada's principal disciple, His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. Is the first time he's giving us time. We'll have online association. Both Philadelphia and Delaware devotees will be joining. Friday same time, or we all join 5 minutes before. We join in 7:30 to 9. So I ask everybody to reach out, other people also as we send, make sure that everyone takes advantage of it. He's going to share, how he met Prabhupada and his experiences. So that's going to be very wonderful. Another session is we will connect very easily. So with this, any comments? Yeah, it's 8:43. Thank you so much. We'll continue tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Good night.